The poor think about money, the rich think about time, and the ones who rule over both think about how to bend time to their will. You've been taught time is equal for everyone, a comforting lie. The wealthy know it's a currency, and they spend it, steal it, and multiply it in ways the masses can't even imagine. Today, I'll show you how they do it, and why, once you see the game, you can never unsee it. In time, it slips through your fingers faster than water, yet it leaves traces sharper than a blade. You've been told it's fair, that the rich man's day is no longer than yours, that every human breathes the same 24 hours. But Machiavelli would have laughed at such a naive fantasy. Powerful people, kings, merchants, magnates, have never played by the clock that governs ordinary men. They have always rewritten the rules, rearranged the hours, and altered the very perception of time in their favor. They do not merely manage time, they weaponize it. And here lies the first untold law. Time is never neutral. It is always leaning towards someone. If you do not make it lean toward you, it will lean toward someone else, and you will pay the price. The peasants of Florence in Machiavelli's day worked until their backs broke, selling their hours for a few copper coins. The merchant princes, however, were not selling their time. They were buying other people's. This is the most elegant form of conquest, to own the minutes of another man's life without spilling a drop of his blood. When the wealthy speak of leverage, they are not speaking only of money or influence or machinery. They are speaking of temporal leverage, the ability to stretch 1 hour into 10, the ability to act today and have the reward arrive tomorrow, next month, or next decade, compounding silently while they sleep. Meanwhile, the poor are trapped in temporal poverty, exchanging hours for immediate survival, with no surplus left to compound into anything greater. Let us strip away the illusions. The masses believe, if I work hard enough, my time will be rewarded. The wealthy know, if I position my time correctly, I will be rewarded whether I work or not. One lives inside the clock, the other stands above it. This is why billionaires can sit idle and yet grow richer every second. Their hours are no longer their own. Their money works, their systems work, their people work, and all of it ticks on regardless of whether they're awake or dead. This is not an accident. It is designed. And it begins with a ruthless reframing of reality. Stop treating time as something you spend. Start treating it as something you invest or acquire from others. Think about war. In war, the one who controls the timing of attacks controls the war itself. It's not just about firepower, but when and how long you apply it. The same is true in wealth. The rich don't just control assets. They control the tempo of transactions, the rhythm of opportunity, the pace of change. They act when others are sleeping. They wait when others are rushing. They buy when others are selling. And they sell when others are begging to buy. To the masses, this looks like luck. To the rich, it's simply mastery of time's currents. Now, here is the paradox that locks most people out of this game. If you only think in days, you will live paycheck to paycheck. If you think in years, you may build a small fortune. But if you think in decades, or even centuries, you will create dynasties. The wealthy manipulate time on all three levels. 1. Micro time, controlling each day's hours to focus only on moves that produce exponential return. They are allergic to trivialities. Every meeting, every call, every conversation is filtered through, Will this compound? 2. Macro time, structuring months and years around long arcs of opportunity. They can delay gratification because they know the delayed reward will be infinitely larger. 3. Generational time, playing moves that will not even mature in their own lifetime, but will serve their descendants. Think of how the Medici financed art and politics in ways that yielded power for centuries. While you rush to meet deadlines, they are designing timelines. Here's the cruel truth. Most people waste time trying to save time. They buy faster devices, read productivity hacks, and multitask themselves into mental exhaustion, yet remain broke. Why? Because they are speeding up inside the wrong game. It's like running faster inside a maze you don't understand. The wealthy don't try to move faster within the maze. They change the maze itself. They redesign the game board so that time flows toward them, not away from them. In Machiavelli's terms, the prince must be both fox and lion. The lion to command time through decisive action. The fox to manipulate the perception of time in others. For example, a landlord can wait months to evict a tenant because each passing month the penalties grow in his favor. A venture capitalist can wait years before selling a company because each year the valuation rises. Meanwhile, the salaried worker cannot delay. Rent is due, food must be bought, and every late payment extracts blood. This asymmetry is the very engine of wealth. And yet, most people reading this will still cling to the comforting lie. I have the same 24 hours as them. You don't. Not if they own your hours. Not if you wake up every morning already owing someone your day. The first step to escaping this trap is not to work harder, but to reclaim your hours from the hands of others. That's where Machiavelli's Untold law begins, and where we'll go next. How the wealthy design systems that allow them to buy decades of other people's lives without them even realizing it. The Machiavellian mechanics of time control. The average man's relationship with time is reactionary. He waits for opportunities to appear. He waits for the right moment. He waits until the pressure is so high that he is forced to act. This is why he remains poor, not just in money, but in influence, freedom, and self-respect. Because waiting is not neutral. Waiting is decay. It is the slow, invisible erosion of your power. The wealthy understand this with brutal clarity. To them, time is not a stage where life plays out. It is clay, malleable, shapeable, subject to their will. 1. They invert the urgency. Poor people feel urgency when the world tells them to move. A bill arrives, a deadline approaches, a crisis erupts. The wealthy engineer urgency on their own terms. They set artificial deadlines, not because they need to, but because they know urgency accelerates results. If they want something done in 6 months, they compress it into 6 weeks. Why? Because time expands to fill the space you give it. A Machiavellian mind understands Parkinson's law. The task will consume the exact amount of time you allow it. So they strangle time until it obeys. This is why they often appear faster, sharper, and more decisive. They are constantly playing in compressed timelines while the masses are trapped in open-ended drift. 2. They weaponize patience. Ironically, the same people who create urgency for themselves have extreme patience with others. When negotiating, they let silence stretch until the other side feels compelled to fill it with concessions. When investing, they are willing to sit for years if it means their position compounds in value. They know impatience is a tax. Every time you demand results too soon, you sell your future for a cheaper present. The wealthy have mastered the duality: sprint internally, wait externally, fast for themselves, slow for everyone else. It is psychological warfare with the clock as their ally. Tharkesian 3. They steal the future from the present. Most people earn in real time. They trade hours for money. When the hours stop, the money stops. The wealthy break this chain. They invest in systems, assets, and networks that keep producing after the initial work is done. They are willing to sacrifice today's comfort for tomorrow's abundance. This is not romantic self-discipline. It is cold arithmetic. Every hour they delay gratification is an hour that compounds in value. They do not just think about making money. They think about when that money arrives and how many times it will multiply before they touch it. To them, every dollar is a soldier, and you don't waste soldiers on battles that don't expand your territory. 4. They decouple from the mass calendar. Most people live in a fixed rhythm. Weekdays for work, weekends for rest. Holidays are sacred. Seasons dictate spending and behavior. The wealthy detach from this artificial rhythm. They know the market doesn't care about your weekend, your birthday, or the summer slump. If there's an opportunity on Christmas morning, they move. If there's no opportunity in July, they wait. They are free from the tyranny of the crowd's schedule, which means they can act when others are asleep, distracted, or celebrating. Machiavelli would call this moving when the enemy believes you will not move. 5. They force asymmetry. A poor man's time is symmetrical. One day is equal to the next. The wealthy make certain days worth 100 ordinary days. They do this by stacking high-impact actions into concentrated bursts. For example, one day of meeting the right investor can shortcut 5 years of bootstrapping. One decisive acquisition can remove a decade of competition. One well-timed market entry can multiply capital in weeks instead of decades. They create these asymmetric days intentionally. They prepare relentlessly. So when the moment appears, they can exploit it instantly. The psychological shift. All of this stems from one fundamental shift. The poor think time happens to them. The wealthy believe they happen to time. Machiavelli understood that power is the ability to impose your will on reality. And there is no greater form of reality than the ticking clock. If you can bend time, you can bend markets. If you can bend markets, you can bend nations. And if you can bend nations, no man can stand in your way. The power of strategic silence. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The masses are taught to treat time as a wage, not as an asset. They are conditioned to exchange hours for money, believing this to be security. But what is security if it comes at the cost of your sovereignty? If every breath you take is already sold to someone else, you are not secure. You are leased. The wealthy think differently. They view time as a multiplier, a force that can compound silently in the background while they sleep, travel, or simply think. Machiavelli understood this principle centuries before the invention of stock markets or passive income. In The Prince, he wrote about making preparations in quiet and striking when the advantage is greatest. This is not just political maneuvering. It is a philosophy of time. The average person looks at a day and asks, "How much can I earn today?" The wealthy look at the same day and ask, "What seeds can I plant today that will earn forever?" This is the law of temporal leverage. Think of it like this. If you use an hour to create something that earns once, like a shift at work, that hour dies as soon as the paycheck clears. But if you use that same hour to create something that earns repeatedly, an asset, a system, a deal, that hour becomes immortal. It keeps working for you long after you've forgotten about it. Most people will never escape their economic cage because they cannot resist the dopamine rush of immediate returns. They want to see proof today. They want to get paid now. And so, they keep killing their hours instead of immortalizing them. The rich? They play a slower game. They manipulate the perception of time in others. They understand that urgency is a weapon, one they rarely turn against themselves, but often against the market, competitors, and even partners. They will make others panic into bad decisions while they themselves remain still. A deal is never about the deal itself. It's about when you strike. The wealthy can walk away from 99 opportunities because they know the 100th, timed perfectly, will dwarf all the rest. But there's another, darker layer to this law. The truly powerful don't just master their own time, they steal it from others. Not through crime, but through control. They build systems where other people's hours, skills, and effort are redirected into their own wealth machine. The clock ticks the same for everyone, but in this arrangement, one man owns the output of 100 clocks. This is why Machiavelli warned against doing for yourself what others can do for you. It wasn't laziness, it was multiplication. If 10 people each give you an hour, you have lived 11 hours in the same span of time. And here's the dangerous secret. This scaling of time is invisible. The masses don't see it because they are busy inside the very system that's draining them. The poor sell hours. The middle class manage hours. The rich own hours, theirs and everyone else's. If you understand this, you begin to see why working harder is rarely the answer. The game is not about squeezing more work into your day. It's about designing a day that works for you long after you've stopped working. In the next part, we'll dissect the 3 Machiavellian tactics the wealthy use to bend time to their will. Tactics that can turn years of grind into weeks of decisive action. And the moment you see them, you'll never see a calendar the same way again. The invisible clock of power. There is a reason the rich rarely seem rushed. It is not because they have less to do. It is because they have learned to force the world to operate on their clock. In Machiavelli's time, kings and princes did this by keeping courtiers waiting for hours before an audience. The delay was not mere arrogance. It was a psychological weapon. It forced others to operate in a state of uncertainty, constantly adjusting to the ruler's pace. When you set the tempo, you control the dance. Today, this principle applies in boardrooms, negotiations, and even casual conversations. The wealthy know that speed is a trap. If you're forced to act fast, you're reacting, not strategizing. But if you slow things down on your terms, the pressure shifts onto the other side. When a billionaire considers an investment, they don't just analyze the numbers. They analyze the timing. They will wait for a competitor to overextend. They will wait for a market to cool. They will wait until desperation makes someone accept terms they would have rejected a month earlier. To them, waiting is not inaction. It is predatory stillness. Machiavelli warned rulers that fortune favors the bold, but destroys the reckless. Boldness is not speed. It is decisive movement at the precise moment when the scales tip in your favor. This requires patience so deep it almost looks like laziness until the strike comes. The average person spends their days reacting to the clock. Wake up at this time. Work at this time. respond to that email within minutes, reply to that message instantly. But the rich create pockets of unreachable time in their schedules. Not because they're too busy, but because they want to train people to respect their time. If you answer instantly, you train the world to believe your time is cheap. If you delay with purpose, you train the world to work for your attention. And in that subtle shift, you gain leverage. There is a famous saying among old Italian bankers, "If I owe you $1, the problem is mine. If I owe you $1,000,000, the problem is yours. But if I owe you both, and I decide when to pay, the problem is your entire life's planning." That is how timing becomes a form of domination. So, when the wealthy manipulate time, they are not just seeking efficiency, they are manufacturing inequality of urgency. You want something now, they can wait. And in that gap, power blooms. Machiavelli would say, "A ruler who acts in haste invites ruin. A ruler who bends time to his will commands not just men, but fate itself." The compounding power of time. The poor think in terms of hours. The middle class thinks in terms of months. The wealthy think in decades. This difference alone explains why fortunes grow in some hands and vanish in others. Machiavelli observed that time erodes the strength of all men, but in politics, it strengthens the man who knows how to endure. In wealth, the same truth applies. If you can plant a seed and resist the urge to dig it up every week to check it, you will eventually shade the world under your tree. The rich understand compounding not as a math concept, but as a weapon. They invest not only money, but reputation, relationships, and information. And then they give those investments time to mature. They know that if they buy an asset today, its value may grow slowly for years. But they also know that growth is exponential, not linear. 1 year of patience can be worth more than the previous 5 years combined. The poor can't see this because they are trained by the system to seek immediate confirmation. A paycheck every 2 weeks, a like within seconds, an approval email by tomorrow. The wealthy design their lives so they can play the long game without being forced into the short one. They build income streams that free them from daily survival decisions. That freedom buys them the most valuable currency in existence, patience. And patience is dangerous. It means they can wait for the right opportunity while everyone else is forced to jump at the wrong one. Think of Warren Buffett. His fortune isn't just the product of good investments. It's the product of decades of letting those investments sit. Every year, his money works harder than he does, because every year, his past decisions are still paying him. This is the secret Machiavelli would have admired. If you can survive the waiting, you can own the ending. The wealthy use time like a chess master uses the clock, not to move fast, but to move last. Because the last move decides the game. How the rich steal time from others. The wealthy don't just use their own time well, they steal yours. Not in the obvious sense of kidnapping hours from your day, but by structuring the world so your time flows into their pockets. Every time you scroll on their platform, you are building their empire. Every time you work overtime for their company, you are compounding their wealth. Every time you consume instead of create, you are adding bricks to their fortress. Machiavelli wrote, "Men will forget the death of their father sooner than the loss of their patrimony." But today, the patrimony they protect isn't just gold. It's your future hours. Look closely. The wealthy design systems where millions of people trade their best years for crumbs, while they trade almost nothing for oceans of human effort. Think of social media. You're not the customer, you're the product. Your attention is harvested, packaged, and sold to advertisers. The platform owners get rich not because they work harder, but because they've convinced billions to hand over their mental energy for free. Think of corporate hierarchies. An entry-level worker might labor 2,000 hours a year, but the CEO doesn't pay for 2,000 hours of effort. He pays for 2,000 hours of life. The energy, focus, and creativity that could have built that worker's own empire. Here's the Machiavellian twist. When you control the flow of other people's time, you don't just get their labor, you get their future. You compress your timeline to wealth while stretching theirs into an endless grind. That's why the rich buy assets, not hours. Hours belong to mortals. Assets belong to dynasties. The wealthy know they can't live forever, but they can make sure the results of their time theft do. A building collects rent long after the builder is dead. A patent earns royalties decades after it's invented. A business runs on the time of employees who weren't even born when it was founded. This is why the first rule of escaping poverty is to stop selling your time like it's a disposable resource. Because the moment you trade an hour for a fixed price, you've told the buyer they own the next hour too. The rich understand. Time doesn't just pass, it pays. And they've made sure it always pays them. How to flip the script and make time serve you. Machiavelli would say, if you cannot control the clock, control the hands that move it. In other words, if you can't own all the time, you must own the structure where time flows. The poor trade hours for wages. The rich trade systems for time. The system runs. The money flows, even when they sleep. If you want to join them, here's the brutal truth. You must stop thinking like a laborer and start thinking like a clockmaker. A clockmaker doesn't chase every second. He builds the mechanism so the seconds chase him. Here's how you flip the game. 1. Create value once. Get paid forever. Write a book. Record a course. Patent an invention. Build an app. These are time multipliers. They don't care if you're awake, sick, or on vacation. They keep earning. 2. Replace tasks with systems. If your income depends on your presence, you're still a slave to the clock. Automate, delegate, outsource. Whatever it takes to break the direct link between your hours and your income. 3. Acquire assets that eat other people's time. Rentals, businesses, intellectual property. They run on the labor of others. You're not exploiting them. You're doing exactly what they would do if they understood the game. 4. Compress your learning curve. Every skill you master faster is stolen time from the enemy's advantage. Read voraciously, seek mentors, reverse engineer the moves of those above you. The less time you waste in ignorance, the sooner you escape the trap. The psychological shift is the hardest. Most people feel guilty about earning without working. That's because they were raised to believe that selling your time is the only moral way to live. But ask yourself, who taught you that? The people buying your time. The Machiavellian law is simple. If you do not design a system that works without you, you are a cog in someone else's machine. Every empire you admire, from ancient kingdoms to modern tech giants, follows this law. They build, they delegate, they scale. Their founders die, but their time machines keep running. When you master this, the feeling is strange at first. You wake up one morning and realize the money didn't stop when you did. The hours you worked yesterday are still paying you today, and that's when you understand. you no longer serve time. Time serves you. The hidden dangers of controlling time. When you finally bend time to your will, you'll discover a strange truth. It's not just a gift. It's a weapon. And weapons always invite enemies. The moment your life no longer runs on the same clock as everyone else's, you separate yourself. You start living outside the urgency that controls most people. That's when two things happen. One, they envy you. People who still trade hours for dollars will resent the fact that your income flows while you sleep. They'll disguise it as moral outrage. It's not fair. You didn't work as hard as the rest of us. What they really mean is, you escaped and I didn't. Two, they'll try to claim your time anyway. Friends, family, business partners, even strangers will assume your free time is up for grabs. They'll ask for favors, projects, commitments, each one a small theft of the very freedom you built. This is where Machiavelli's darker advice applies. The man who controls his time must defend it more fiercely than his gold. Wealth without boundaries is an open vault. If you don't guard it, it will be drained. Not by thieves in the night, but by obligations that look harmless. The rich understand this. They aren't just good at making money. They're ruthless about saying no. They protect their time with the same paranoia a king protects his throne. Because here's the paradox. Once you control time, you have more to lose. Not money, but the rarest luxury of all. Days you own entirely. If you give those away carelessly, you're back where you started. Worse, you'll know exactly what you lost, because you once tasted freedom. The untold law isn't just about mastering time. It's about defending it against those who trade your hours for their comfort. And that's the part most people aren't ready for. Not the climb to wealth, but the fortress you must build once you get there. How to weaponize time against your competition. Controlling your own time is power, but controlling the perception of time in others, that's domination. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. If you can manipulate how fast or slow your rivals believe the game is moving, you can control every move they make. Here's how the wealthy do it. 1. They force others into urgency. Deadlines, sudden offers, limited opportunities. These create a fog of panic. People make mistakes when they feel the clock is against them. They rush into bad deals, overlook details, and surrender leverage. 2. They move slowly when others expect speed. When everyone else is chasing quick wins, the rich delay. They let the market exhaust itself. By the time competitors burn out, they're still holding their resources. Calm, patient, ready to strike. 3. They distort the timeline of progress. They'll hint at major moves without making them, keeping rivals frozen in anticipation. Weeks turn into months. And while competitors wait, the rich quietly position themselves for the real attack. To the outsider, it looks like luck. In reality, it's a psychological trap. Make your opponent believe they have no time when they need it most. Make them waste time when it's actually running out. The wealthy understand that time pressure erodes intelligence. The more you make your rival feel they're falling behind, the more they'll act emotionally instead of strategically. Machiavelli's unspoken rule here is brutal. Do not fight your enemy where they are strongest. Fight them where they are hurried. You can outthink a genius if you make them act before they're ready. You can outmaneuver a giant if you keep them waiting long enough to rot from within. This is how time becomes not just your shield, but your sword. The final law, making time serve you. Forever. Most people serve time. They work for it. They trade it away in hours, days, decades, until nothing is left. The wealthy flip the equation. They make time work for them. Here's the difference. The poor sell hours. They think, if I just work harder, I'll get ahead. But hard work without ownership only compounds someone else's wealth. The rich buy hours. They hire, automate, delegate. Every task they no longer do is more time freed for high-leverage moves, strategy, relationships, opportunities. The elite compound hours. They use assets, investments, systems, intellectual property that generate value even while they sleep. Every day, the system runs without them. Their power multiplies. Machiavelli would have called this immortality through structure, not in the literal sense, but in influence. Your wealth continues to grow long after you've stopped touching it. And your decisions ripple through years like falling dominoes. The ultimate power is to live outside the urgency of the world. No alarms, no deadlines, just a calm awareness that you decide when and how to act. The rest of the world is chasing time like a drowning man gasping for air. You're simply breathing. And when you master this, you're not just rich. You've become untouchable.